Hi, welcome back to another book review. Today I'm going to be reviewing Queen of Sorcery by David Eddings. Queen of Sorcery is the second book in the Belgariad, the first of which is Pawn of Prophecy, which I did a review of last week. There will be spoilers. I'm going to spoil the crap out of this, but I liked it, so if that's all you want to know, you can stop watching now. If you want to hear more about what I thought about it, keep on watching. This takes place right after the end of the first book. In the first book, they were going on a journey to find the orb, and they are still on a journey to find the orb. And this orb is going to be used to resurrect the evil god Tarak, and all of the people that he used to rule over are trying to cause unrest in the other lands and are also trying to get the orb. So they have to deal with all that in this book and probably the others. If that sounds kind of boring, it's not. It definitely sounds like it would be because you're just journeying. But it actually is very interesting, at least in certain parts. So they start off going to the first country, which is south of them. And this country, called Erendia, is involved. They're not in a civil war, although they used to be. And there's still unrest between the two different factions, essentially. And you deal a bit with potential rebellion and all of that. And honestly, this is the most boring part of the book, I think. This first part. There's 3 parts to this book. This part's probably the most boring. It's not even that bad. It's just like, okay. It's like, okay, whatever. It's kind of, rebellion, blah, blah, blah. No rebellion actually really happens, but it's discussed, and it's found out that the Murgos, who are some of the evil people, well, they're not evil people, but they're basically characterized as evil people. Anybody who is ruled by the evil god Tarak is evil. It's very black and white for the most part in these books. So these Murgos are infiltrating a lot of the different lands and causing problems, and they're trying to whisper and say, oh, this faction is about to take all your power away. You might want to beat them before that happens, when that faction is not trying to do anything. And, they're whispering on both sides, trying to get them to fight. Because if they fight and it causes unrest and it distracts everyone from what the Murgos are actually doing. So that's kind of what they go over in the first part. A few other things happen, but mostly it's trying to deal with that and trying to prevent civil war. Again, like in the first book, they were trying to rally the local leaders, basically the kings of the 2 countries they went to in the first book, basically to mobilize them, saying, okay, this is what's happening. This is the prophesied time. Have your armies ready and prepare your countries because shit's going to happen. And so this is more of that kind of in here. So that's what they're doing in the first part, is they're basically telling the king, like, hey, get ready. Second part, they go to Tolnedra, and one of the interesting things about this, Tolnedra was involved in a treaty thousands of years ago, and it says that whenever they have a princess who reaches the age of 16, she has to go to Riva, and Riva is is a country that is named after the first person who was ever able to hold the orb. And so the princess must go there in her, bridal attire and stay there for 3 days. And if a Rivan king needs a bride and is available, he will go and marry her. And she just has to make herself available to be married. And after 3 days, if no one shows up, she can leave. And this is a treaty, and they've had to do this for thousands of years. And so it's Tolnedra is an analog for Rome and also the Ferengi, which is hilarious. They're very much into business and money, but also they have a lot of imperial type stuff, like Roman type things. And they are about to also undergo maybe some civil war, but because instead of the factions are warring with each other, the emperor is old. He isn't dying, but he's old, and he doesn't have any sons, and he doesn't have any family really to take over the throne. Nobody with any power, anybody. So all the families are trying to vie for his position, and they're all talking about bribes, and whoever has the most money is probably going to become emperor. It's very Ferengi-ish, and it's really funny. But the emperor does have a daughter, and she just happens to be 15. She's going to be 16 in the next year. Guess who she's gonna be intended for, and that would be Garion, because of course Garion is the chosen one. We know this. We all know this. And so he has a daughter, and he's talking to Belgariad and Polgara, saying, yeah, can we just not do the treaty? Like, I don't want to send her to Riva. There's a lot of crap going on. I don't want her to get killed, which is reasonable. And they're like, no, it's a treaty. You have to do it. Even though it's thousands of years old, you have to do it. And he doesn't want to. He also doesn't want to listen to them when they say that the Murgos are causing unrest, because there's a lot of Murgos in Tol Nedra. And the Emperor just says, oh, well, they're really good for trade. They trade with us a lot. And he's not listening to the people who have been dealing with the Murgos, saying they're going to cause problems. So he doesn't listen. So they leave. They leave the country. And lo and behold, the daughter tricks one of her tutors to take her out of the city by saying it was an order of her father, but it wasn't. And she winds up tagging along. And some of the other members of the group are like, well, we need to send her back. They're going to be really mad at us. But the Emperor's going to think we stole her. And Polgara is just like, no, she can come along with us. And of course, Polgara knows that this girl, her name is Sinedra, is the one that's destined to marry Garion. And Polgara says, I want to keep her close, so I don't have to go chasing her down when it's time for her to get married. And I don't want something to happen to her, so I'm going to keep her close so I can keep an eye on her and just keep her where I want her until she and Garion are supposed to get married. She doesn't say it in so many words, but these books are very obvious. If you've read any fantasy, you can tell what's going on. So that happens. And then they have to go to a country called Nyissa. And Nyissa is very interesting because it's a sort of a serpent country. They kind of live alongside snakes, and they're very snake-like people. And it's very creepy. Very interesting, very creepy. And right before Nyissa, we actually get to see some of Garion's power. Garion, we get a tiny, tiny hint of it in the first book that he has powers of sorcery. He has magic. In this one, we actually get to see some of that. Because they discuss a little bit how magic works in this book, and it's supposed to be, if you will it, it will happen if you have a strong enough will. And Garion has this voice in his head that is kind of telling him what he might be able to do. And the voice doesn't seem to be malicious. It seems to be annoyed sometimes, but it doesn't need to be malicious. It's just trying to teach him, this is what you can do. You can use power. And he winds up killing the person who killed his parents, which I find very interesting. They got the revenge thing out of the way really quickly. Because he's like, I swear I'm going to kill the person who killed my parents. He does that, says that in the first book. And he says it at the beginning of this book. And you think that, oh, okay, it's going to take a while. But no, he manages to kill him in the second book. Now, he wasn't actively hunting this guy. He didn't actually know who it was. This person was threatening to kill not only him, but also Polgara and the rest of his party. So he just, the voice in his head told him, concentrate on the guy and tell him and say burn, and, burn him alive. And he did. And he's like, oh, crap. And so he finds out that he has powers, and he's kind of being a typical angsty teenager about it. It's like, why didn't you tell me I had powers? And blah, blah, blah. I don't want these. Take these away. And Polgara, I cannot say her name, Polgara, tells him, you've opened the floodgates. You can't put it back, and you need to learn how to control it. Otherwise, you're going to probably hurt someone. And he doesn't listen. He's like, oh, no, I'm a broody teenager boy. I don't need to listen to you, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, so they go to Nyissa, and they are staying on a boat with allies because they don't want to go into Nyssa because they are notoriously not friendly. And actually, in the past, they killed the Riven King. Fortunately did not manage to kill all the Riven line because otherwise Garion would not exist. But so that's why they're really not keen on going there. I don't remember why they have to go there. I think they just do because I think they're following the path of the orb. But so they have to go there. But they're staying on the boat and they're like, all right, we're not going to go into Nyssa. So we're going to stay in the nice little area, like the merchant area that's sort of neutral territory. And some stuff happens. Garion tries to save a slave who has jumped in the river and is trying to cross over to the merchant area. And Garion uses some really, he teleports him. He just says, like, be over there. But he doesn't realize, because he's not trained, that type of magic is like a beacon for anybody who has magic. Or, and a lot of the Murgos, or some of the Murgos have magic. So they can zoom in on where he is, and that's not good. And so can the Queen of Nyssa, who is decidedly not friendly. And so Garion gets captured. Garion, gets captured a lot. So he gets captured, and it doesn't really amount to a whole lot. He gets captured, and then he's not captured. He does learn to do a little bit more magic. The voice in his head is trying to teach him. And eventually it's funny because the voice in his head can talk to Garion and can also talk to Polgara. And then so Polgara, Garion, and the voice are all chatting, and Garion's like, get out of my head, stop it. If you've ever seen the Team 4-Star Abridged series with like Piccolo and Kami and Nail, it's kind of like that, and it's really funny. But anyway, so they pretty much they kill they don't kill the queen, they transform her and into just a snake. And it's like, all right, you're gonna be a snake forever because you suck. You can never enjoy your boy toys. She tried to turn Garion into a boy toy, and Polgara was not happy about that. So yeah, and then it ends, and they are currently waiting on Belgariad to get back to the party. At some point, Belgariad and one of the other people separated from the party. They had to go do stuff. We don't know what that stuff is. We'll probably find out in the next book. But yeah, so that's kind of the basic plot of this novel. It probably, again, doesn't sound like a whole lot happened. I swear, more stuff happened than when I'm telling you, but those are kind of like the highlights. What did I think of this novel? I like this one better than the first one. I think more because they're actually developing more of the world, the story, their powers, all that. This book is a little bit longer than the first one. It's probably about 100 pages longer, a little less than that. Although I will say the first act, which was about 140 pages, was really boring in comparison to the rest of it. Again, not really boring, but more boring. I don't remember as much about it because it just wasn't as interesting. More interesting stuff happened in the other two parts. But the other two parts were much more interesting. They made up for the first part. So I remember saying in my Pawn of Prophecy review that there was violence, but it wasn't super graphic or anything like that. And I was like, well, maybe that's just because the books don't get graphic, or maybe it's because it's the first novel. It turned out that's just because it was the first novel. They have a lot of pretty graphic violence in this. What I like is they have Garion reacting to it, going, oh my god, oh, because he's not used to it. And so I appreciate that they have him reacting to it, and he's not used to it, and he's kind of freaking out about it. So there's a decent amount of violence in this. Again, I see why this would appeal to teenage boys, but this is definitely, like, I think just supposed to be regular adult fantasy. There wasn't really any sexual stuff in the first one, and there's still nothing like explicit in here, but there's definitely some innuendo more so. I think because Garion is because in the first book he was 9 and then eventually he was 14. This one I think he's close. He's like 15 or close to 15. And so they're like, okay, we can do a little innuendo. They even have a countess from one of the countries trying to hit on him, and he's like trying really hard not to stare at her boobs. He's like, I don't know what to think. You're hot, but I don't want to deal with you because you don't seem right. And they have more innuendo for different things, and it's funny. it feels appropriate for a 15-year-old boy, like that type of level. It feels appropriate, and I appreciate that. I'm all for, again, I read Game of Thrones and I read a lot of other stuff, and I'm okay with gratuitous. I mean, that's fine. But I feel like it is an appropriate level for what this novel is trying to achieve. Again, that may change in the others. I don't know. But I like this. I'm definitely interested in reading more. What I like about this one and the first one, they seem to be progressing powers and abilities really organically. The only new skill he really learns in this, besides his few little things with sorcery, is how to read and write. And he doesn't even fully know how to read and write yet. Sinedra, again, because they're bored, like in the first one, Garion is bored and Sinedra is bored in this one. She decides to teach him how to read and write. And he hasn't learned how to read and write yet, which, again, interesting and also makes sense for it's the sort of time period type thing they're trying to set it in and sort of the area. He lived on a farm. He wouldn't have had to know how to read and write. And I also think that his aunt, this is just my theory, didn't want him to know how to read or write because then he might have been able to read about some of the prophecies or the different stories and put two and two together, and that would have been dangerous for him. So I have a feeling he was kept in the dark for a reason. Although I think Belgariad knows he's learning to read and write, and at this point I think she's going, okay, whatever. I guess at this point he should know how to do it. So they introduced a new character in here. They introduced a couple new characters, but the main one is Sinedra, who is the Tolnedran princess who will eventually have to marry Garion. And they introduce her, and she's a brat, and she's annoying. But I have read reviews where people hate her, and I think she has more of a more POV type parts in the third book, and maybe that's where it comes in. But she is annoying and obnoxious, but she's supposed to be. She is a sheltered 15-year-old girl who's a spoiled 15-year-old sheltered princess, and she's annoying and obnoxious. She expects certain things, and she's a brat, and I think that's fine. I think that's perfectly in line with what they're trying to do. And Garion hates her, and she kind of hates him too. They bicker a lot. Although eventually, I think she starts to like him. It very much reminded me of Shinji and Asuka's relationship in Evangelion, except way less depressing and way less trauma. But where they're young teenagers. I think they're both 15, and they're just bickering a lot. They come from completely different backgrounds, but they are attracted to each other to some degree. And I think she kisses him at one point. I think it's mostly that she's happy that he's okay. But yeah, I don't hate her yet. I might. I don't know. I'm a little more forgiving because I know I get her character. I get that she's supposed to be annoying and obnoxious. I honestly, so the author's male, but I believe he actually, even though his wife is not credited on these ones, I believe she helped him write these, or at least went over them with him, because she's credited on, I believe, there's some prequels. I think Sorceress Polgara and Belgariad the Sorcerer or something like that. I think in those ones, I think she's credited as being one of the authors. And so I think that he had some input probably from his wife. Yeah, that is just good at it. But writing the female characters, they feel like actual characters. They actually have stuff to do. And I'm okay with Sinedra being characterized as the annoying, obnoxious little teenage girl because she's supposed to be. That makes complete sense in the story. And Polgara, she's a badass. She's awesome, and everybody's afraid of her, and I'm perfectly fine with that. And so, yeah, I appreciate they have good characterization of not just the male characters, but also the female characters in here. Especially because this was an early 80s book, and that wasn't always like a common thing. So I definitely appreciate that. So I would definitely recommend Queen of Sorcery. If you like the first one, Pawn of Prophecy, definitely pick up the second one. Obviously, when I'm done with the series, I'll have a review of the whole series. But this one is very much in line with the first one. more of what's happening. It develops more of the story. It gives you a little bit more of the mystery. It unveils just a little bit more, but they still tell you everything. So, because they always keep some stuff vague in here, and some stuff is really easy to figure out, and I think they intend for you to figure it out. But other stuff, they're just not telling you, which is fine. I'm very interested. So yeah, I'd recommend this, and of course, Pawn of Prophecy. And yeah, go ahead and check it out. It's definitely a very, very good fantasy novel. Very easy read. It's not difficult. It doesn't have any like weird fancy language in it or anything. It's super quick. I read 180 pages of this in a day. Because the first part was a little hard to get through, so I took a couple days on that one. But yeah, no, it's very easy. It's pretty easy to get through. I enjoyed it. And yeah, so I will be reading Magician's Gambit next, which is the third book in the Belgariad. And I'll be doing a review of that next week. Once I am done with the Belgariad, which is 5 novels total, I'll try to take a break in between that, because the Belgariad has a sequel series called The Malorian, which I also intend to read, but I want to give a break in between so you're not just watching reviews of one series, because that can get kind of annoying, especially if you're not interested in it, and I completely understand. So I'll try to do some other books in between. But yeah, so I hope you enjoyed this. Again, any recommendations for books, go ahead and leave them down in the comments. If I ever get a chance, if I ever get the extra cash or or for Christmas, I can always ask for some of these books so I can read them and see what you guys like and see if I like them too. And yeah, so I hope you enjoy this, and I will see you next time. Bye.